Today, we are going to unravel a condition that is surprisingly common, but, it's also deeply misunderstood. We're talking about polycystic ovary syndrome, or PCOS, and we're going to dig into the really complex puzzle at its heart, all based on a fantastic review from Frontiers in Endocrinology, to really understand the vicious cycle that keeps it going. And just to give you an idea of how important this is, just look at this number, up to 22%. According to the research, PCOS affects up to 22% of women of reproductive age all across the globe. That's more than 1 in 5 people. So yeah, this isn't some rare thing. It's a huge health issue that really deserves a much closer look. So what makes PCOS so tricky to get a handle on? Well, it's because it's not just one single straightforward problem. It's a lot more like a puzzle, right? With a whole bunch of different symptoms that can look totally different from one person to the next. And to top it all off, there's no single obvious cause. This quote from our source material really just hits the nail on the head. It highlights the core challenge here. You've got multiple pathways, a huge variety of symptoms, and no common cause. This complexity is exactly why getting a diagnosis can be so hard, and why the whole experience can be so confusing for so many people. Okay, but even with a puzzle this complex, there are always a few key pieces. And researchers have managed to zero in on 2 main suspects, if you will, that seem to be right at the center of this whole PCOS mystery. Understanding these 2 is really the first big step to seeing the entire picture. All right, our first suspect is hyperandrogenemia, or HA for short. Now, that's a mouthful, but the concept is pretty simple. It just means higher than normal levels of androgens, think testosterone, in the female body. The source actually calls this the biochemical hallmark of the disease, which is just a sciencey way of saying it's the biggest hormonal clue we have for PCOS. And suspect number 2 is insulin resistance, or IR. This one is a metabolic issue. See, normally insulin is like a key that lets sugar into your cells for energy. With insulin resistance, it's like the locks on the cells are getting rusty. The key doesn't work so well, so your body has to make way more insulin just to get the job done. And it's an incredibly common feature for women with PCOS. So let's recap. We've got 2 very different problems on our hands. One is hormonal, too many androgens, and the other is metabolic. The body isn't handling insulin the right way. For the longest time, the big question was, how in the world are these 2 connected? Are they just 2 separate things that happen to show up together? Well, the answer to that's the real twist in this story. Because it turns out, our 2 suspects aren't just partners in crime, they're actually locked in a feedback loop, a self-reinforcing vicious cycle, where each one makes the other one worse. This cycle is literally the engine that drives PCOS. So let's break down how it works. So here's the crucial first step. The cycle often kicks off with that metabolic problem. When your body is resistant to insulin, it panics and just produces more and more of it. That state is called hyperinsulinemia. And all that extra insulin floating around doesn't just mess with your blood sugar, it directly throws your hormones out of whack. And this is exactly how it happens. First, those high insulin levels go straight to the ovaries and basically tell them, hey, make more androgens. But that's not all. It also sends a message to the liver to stop making a protein called sex hormone-binding globulin, or SHBG. Now, SHBG's job is to basically act like handcuffs for testosterone, keeping it inactive. So, with less SHBG around, you get more free testosterone running wild, causing problems. But wait, the story doesn't stop there. This is where the cycle loops all the way back on itself. The high androgen levels, which were just caused by the insulin resistance, now turn around and make that insulin resistance even worse. Let's take a look at how that happens. So how does this work? Well, excess androgens tend to encourage fat storage right around your midsection, what we often call central obesity. And that specific type of fat isn't just sitting there, it's metabolically active, and it's a known factory for insulin resistance. As if that's not enough, testosterone itself can actually make individual fat cells get bigger, which just worsens the body's response to insulin even more. And there it is, the complete vicious cycle. High insulin causes high androgens. High androgens cause more insulin resistance, and that, of course, leads to even higher insulin. You see, it's a self-perpetuating loop that, once it really gets going, can be incredibly hard to stop. This right here is the central engine of PCOS. Now that we get the engine, we can start to look at the consequences. This core cycle, it doesn't just stay contained. Oh no. It sends out ripples that affect the entire body, leading to that whole wide range of symptoms that we associate with PCOS. And you can see the direct results right here. The high androgens mess with the menstrual cycle, which leads to irregular periods and trouble with ovulation. In fact, get this, PCOS is the cause of 75% of infertility that's due to a lack of ovulation. The androgens also trigger skin issues like acne and unwanted hair growth, while the insulin resistance part contributes to things like obesity and unhealthy cholesterol levels. It's all connected. And those ripples, they don't stop there. Over the long term, that constant strain on your metabolic system dramatically increases the risk for some really serious conditions. The source material is crystal clear on this. If left unchecked, PCOS is a major risk factor for type 2 diabetes, high blood pressure, and even cardiovascular events like a stroke. And that is why understanding this central cycle is so important. But, and this is a big but, here's the hopeful part. By understanding the vicious cycle at the very heart of PCOS, we also understand how to break it. The goal of treatment isn't just to run around chasing individual symptoms. It's to interrupt that feedback loop. And the number one first-line approach that the research recommends is lifestyle modification. Now, why is that? It's because it is the one thing that can powerfully target both sides of the cycle at the exact same time, improving your insulin sensitivity and lowering your androgen levels. And these interventions are incredibly powerful. The research points out that even a pretty modest weight loss of just 5 to 10% can significantly drop both insulin and androgen levels. Often that's enough to restore menstrual cycles and really improve symptoms. It's all about disrupting that cycle through things like diet and exercise. And for when lifestyle changes just aren't quite enough, medical support can offer some more targeted ways to break that cycle. And notice how these treatments map directly onto the problems we've been talking about, right? You have insulin sensitizers like metformin, which directly help the body use insulin better. Oral contraceptives can manage the hormonal symptoms, and ovulation inducers can help with fertility. Each one is like a different tool you can use to throw a wrench in the works of that vicious cycle. So, I want to leave you with this final thought. We've seen how PCOS is powered by this vicious cycle between insulin and androgens. Right now, our treatments work by pushing back on one or both sides of that cycle. But what if? What if future therapies could find a way to break the link itself, to actually decouple these two systems from each other? It's a fascinating question, and one that could literally change everything about how we manage this incredibly complex condition. Thanks so much for joining us for this explainer.